to make a contribution to the area of forensic medicine, and she absolutely revolutionized everything.
Yeah, she was ahead of her time, definitely. Just the fact that she did not let the fact that Harvard didn't really accept women keep her from...
Well, not just Harvard. I mean, it was the society at the time.
She was supposed to be a housewife.
Yeah, and she did it her way. She used her skills and her force of personality and her money to do what had to be done. And that was really, I think, one of the amazing things about her is that she kept her eye on the goal, and she knew what the objective was, and she didn't let anything stand in her way to get there.
Learning a little bit more about you, what took you down the path to study forensics?
I started out when I was very young. I was an EMT, emergency medical technician, and paramedic, and that was really my first adult job. I did that for a while, and I was down working in Tennessee and not really going anywhere, and was actually a firefighter at one point. Then I tried nursing school, and I hated that. And somebody told me about a place in Baltimore called Shock Trauma, where they had this legendary trauma center run by this guy, R. Adams Cowley, and doing these things. I heard about this at a Christmas party in December, and by March, I sold everything I owned, and I came up to Baltimore. I just knew that there had to be something here. I went to Shock Trauma's undergraduate program at UMBC in emergency health services, and that's where I ended up finishing my degree. But in the meantime, I had been doing writing. I've been doing freelancing, and just as a hobby, I ended up did a piece for the Washington Post, and I had a thing on All Things Considered, and it was a real thrill. So I got sort of sidetracked into journalism, and I never really worked in the field again. I did that until this opportunity came up at the medical examiners. The thing is that the chief who hired me, Dr. David Fowler, they really like EMTs and paramedics because they train these guys as investigators. The skill set is very similar. EMTs are trained to respond quickly to a scene. You do your assessment of airway, breathing, and circulation, and you transport and you report back your observations to the medical control. And it's very similar what forensic investigators do. You respond quickly to a scene, you observe, and you report back. A lot of overlap, and there's also a lot of overlap between, surprisingly, or maybe not so surprisingly, between journalism and forensic medicine. Very common tactics and strategies. They're both about establishing the facts, determining a fact from an opinion, verifying information, being skeptical, critical thinking, and then distilling what you know into a narrative. That's what a reporter does, and that's what the medical examiner does. They're basically writing the last chapter of a person's life. So it really felt like a natural transition into the area that I'm in now.
What do you have next on your schedule?
There's still things to do with 18 Tiny Deaths. The UK edition is being published by Endeavour, an imprint of Octopus. So there's things there. I've got various appearances here and there and doing some things with 18 Tiny Deaths, trying to work on a follow-up book, trying to get things in the hopper and keep on going.
Where can people go to find out more about you and 18 Tiny Deaths?
There certainly is BruceGoldfarb.com. I do have my own website. I'm trying to keep touch with people that way. I do engage with people on Goodreads. They can follow me there. On Facebook, I interact a lot. There's also a page for 18 Tiny Deaths on Facebook. I'm also 18 Tiny Deaths on Instagram. On Twitter, I'm Bruce_Goldfarb, trying to do the whole social media and interact.
We are also on Reddit, where you are letting people ask questions.
Yeah, and ask me anything. It was something I wanted to do. That was a lot of fun. I wanted to get familiar with that whole process of how to do that. And I hope to do another one in some weeks. Once the book has been out for a while and people have a chance to read it, think of some good questions. That was before the book was even published, so people were only asking about the nutshells. I hope I can do a real good active Ask Me Anything someday soon.
I guess the question I'd like to ask also is there any future plans for the nutshells to travel?
Over my dead body.
How difficult was that to do the Smithsonian one?
With the Smithsonian, there was a whole team of people. Logistically, it was just an operation. There were several months of preparation, conservation to repair them and strengthen the dioramas. There was a whole team of people who specialize in moving art. It's a whole specialty. And when you think about it, there's sculpture and all kinds of weird things, but this is what they do. And so there was just weeks and weeks and weeks of preparation, constructed these foam core boxes that went in cardboard boxes. And then they had this special truck with this great suspension, and they did them in 3 batches of only 6 boxes at a time. They didn't stack them. They're all on one level, and they were placed between the wheelbase. So it was on a pivot point. There's less vibration, and this whole elaborate thing to get them to Washington. And then they were checked when they were moved there, and then the whole thing in reverse to bring them back. everything checked when they were returned and not a thing happened during that move. They're extraordinarily delicate, 80-year-old artifacts where pieces are held literally by 80-year-old string. Some parts, the burned cabin, for example, it's like literally tissue paper thin. It was such an operation to move these very gently 35 miles down the street back and forth. Anything beyond that, we get asked all the time, once or twice a year, a museum in Europe or whoever, in all these places, I'm sure they would love to have them on exhibit. But for one thing, Frances Glessner Lee herself said that they are meant for teaching and not for exhibition. But they physically really are not strong enough to do that sort of thing, which is unfortunate. The exhibition at the Renwick Gallery was in trade for the conservation work that they had done on them. I thought that was a reasonable thing. They put literally hundreds of thousands of dollars of work into the dioramas, and so it was really nice to let the public, I believe it was over 100,000 people. I went to see them when they were on exhibit at the Renwick.
I think we were in a room with all of them.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
we were there the last day. We definitely wanted to get down there to see them because we didn't know if we'd ever have an opportunity. Oh my gosh, we waited in line for a long time to get in there.
I feel so bad about that. That was the second most popular exhibit that they had in the history of the museum up until that point. Had they known it was going to have that kind of response, they would have laid it out a little differently so there was better traffic flow. And I went several times, and I felt bad even being in the room. I didn't want to occupy any space and take anything away from. I can see them anytime. I don't need this. I just wanted to allow other people to be in the room, but it was extraordinary. Nutshells, unfortunately, have become a victim of their own success. I can't help it that they're written about in Atlas Obscura, and people read them. They're in travel guides, and I try and tell them they're really not on the usual tourist kind of thing when you're visiting Baltimore. It's a working forensic medical center. People just sort of walk in off the street. They're in town and they want to see the nutshells, and I just can't keep doing that 2, 3, or 4 times a day and spend my day in that room. We've unfortunately had to close them to the general public. We'll have to see what kinds of things. Plus, my schedule is getting busy, and I'm the only one who will do it. So it's just sort of really iffy to kind of predict going forward.
Another thing that's in that room also are the gunshot wounds. She did those as well.
Yes,
correct?
she did. And in the next room, there are those 3 heads. I don't know if you saw those in that. Right. So those all came from Harvard. That's right.
Wow.
And that was a unique set. Those bullet wound models, they're extraordinary. There was nothing else like it at the time, and they're really amazingly accurate.
In the book, it was interesting that she tried to do it herself with pigs.
That was her idea. There were so many things. I wish I'd known more about that. But yeah, she offered to shoot pigs to make these samples of bullet wounds. It's possible. I'm not certain, so I didn't put it in the book, but I think it's possible that actual autopsies were done at the rocks. There's some reference to it, but I never could document that it actually happened, whether it was just talking about an autopsy or they actually observed an autopsy. She was quite involved and really very hands-on, so to speak.
She must have been an amazing woman.
I wish I could hear her voice. There's no video of her. There's no movie. People have searched. I would so much like to hear her voice. She did some radio programs. I've searched for the audio, asked family members about family movies, these sorts of things. There's apparently no film or audio of her. I'd so much like to see her and hear her speak.
I imagine her being a very no-nonsense speaker and just getting down to the facts. And
yeah. Oh, she did not suffer fools gladly.
Yeah, I was going to just say, she put people in their place.
Pretty
yes.
Well, Bruce, thank you so much for agreeing to speak with us today. We enjoyed this book so much. You did such a good job, especially laying out what forensics was like in the past and how we've gotten to where we are today and how she was a big part of that.
She was indeed. It was just delightful. I'd enjoy talking about my favorite subject in the world. I enjoyed talking with you so much. I'm so glad you enjoyed the book. Enjoyed talking with you.
Well, keep us posted when the next book is done. We'd be fascinated to read that one, too.
I will make sure to do that.
Well, you have a good day.
Thank you. You too.
I thought I knew a lot about Frances Glessner Lee, and after reading this book, I realized I didn't know anything.
Well, we didn't know about her. We knew about the nutshell galleries, and we had the pleasure of seeing them, but we didn't know about her life and how she got started. This book really, for a book that told someone's life. Some of those can be so dry, but this one was so easy to read. He just took her character and told her story. Very readable. It's not like a textbook.
Oh, he totally fleshed her out. I mean, you felt like
you knew her.
And not just that her relationship with her parents, her relationship with her husband, which I thought was...
That was a good one.
I enjoyed that very much. My first foray into the nutshell galleries was the documentary that John Waters did about them, and that's when I became fascinated with them. And I am still consider it such a privilege that I've gotten to see them twice now. I can see why they don't open it to the public.
They're very fragile. They are just...
But they're still being used as a teaching tool. They need to preserve it for that.
The one thing about Bruce, he's like a mother. These are his children. You cannot hurt them in any way, and he is there to protect them.
He was the perfect person to write her story.
Yes,
because he cares so deeply for the individual dioramas, and in turn, just her relationship with forensics.
And she was the perfect person. She had the money. She had the ability. She got her way. She went to Harvard. She couldn't go there as a student.
And she never let anything hold her back. In considering that this was the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, it's just amazing. Like nowadays you hear stories of women and it's like, oh, look, she's got gumption. But this was in a time when women weren't allowed to do anything.
She wasn't supposed to do anything but be a housewife. And she had a brain.
Well, not a housewife because she was a wealthy person.
Yes.
There was no housewife
society woman.
Absolutely.
Hold teas and go to operas.
There's a lot of people that I would have loved to meet in history if I could go back in time, and she definitely tops the list.
Oh, definitely. I can imagine she was a force to be reckoned with.
Absolutely.
But the amazing thing is when you see pictures of the faculty or the people who have come to the classes, there is Frances Glessner Lee sitting in the corner. She is not mentioned. Her face is there, but it doesn't even mention her name as attending. She wanted to be there and witness, and she was the backbone of it, but she let everything else take the forefront.
Don't let that sway you into thinking that she didn't push.
Oh, she pushed.
She butted heads with J. Edgar Hoover. She would butt heads with anybody that got in her way. Just because she didn't need a lot of notoriety, she was fighting the good fight.
Yes, she was. She must have been an amazing woman.
And talk about when somebody died. When you read this book, you will not believe some of the things that went on, because these were farmers, these were just tradesmen who were solving murders. There was people that had a gunshot wound, but they were like, oh, they died of natural causes.
The problem was, and one of the things she fought for, was to create the medical examiners, because they were trained doctors. Every state had a coroner, and the coroner could be Joe Smith from the bike shop next door, who had never even seen a medical book, and he comes out, he decides how the person died. No training, no qualifications at all, and it's still going on.
Yes, it definitely
It's still
is.
Across the country. They're political hacks, who give donations and they get appointed.
But thanks to her, we have moved towards areas having medical examiners. She has brought about some amazing changes in the forensic world. That's why she is considered the mother of forensics.
And Bruce did an excellent job in this book. I highly recommend it.
Oh, definitely. If you are interested in historical you enjoy forensics, this is definitely a book for you.
Yes.
And there's also pictures of some of the galleries of her, some of the people she worked with, and the places she lived, which was interesting also in itself.
If you can, be sure and go back and look at the documentaries.